Good morning, everyone. Today, for my article, I will be presenting the Syria Trojan Women, Rethinking the Public with Therapeutic Theater by Edward Blaise Zitter. Now, before I start talking about the play and some of the article itself, I want to talk about the Syrian Uprising. It started as a nonviolent protest against the government and their leader, Bashar al-Assad. Now, Assad had come into power in the 2000 after succeeding his father. And he came into power with the reputation of being a modernizer and a reformer, but he did not follow up on his expectations and returned to using his father's ways, which were basically torture and censorship. And obviously, this didn't make the people very happy. And an example of one of the first major protests that occurred in March 2011 in Dar, a southern province of Syria, was when these young teenagers or young boys decided to write anti-graffiti on their walls. But the government did not like this. They arrested them and tortured them for this act. And because of this, protests started to begin because these were young boys that did not deserve to be tortured for writing graffiti. And of course, in response to these protests, many were tortured and killed by the government. And this led to civil war between the government and the citizens of Syria. And the citizens and even ex-military people from the Syria military started forming militias to go against the government. And just want to talk about Al-Baida was one of the site of one of the worst massacres during the Civil War. And some of the women throughout the play actually talk about this massacre. And just to show how devastating this war has been on Syria, I decided to include some before and after pictures of what it used to look like to compare to now. On to therapeutic theater. Therapeutic theater aids in the help and the healing of individual and national identities, as Zitter puts it, and often uses real experiences and turns them into art. So what this means is often this type of theater is done to help a group of people or a person get over or overcome trauma that they have felt. And so this is the healing of the individual. This is the helping of the actors who, throughout the process of doing the play, are getting therapy through their group activities, their theater games, and by using their experiences and creating a play based around it. So in turn, by going through their trauma again, they are coming to terms with it. And then for national identities, when this, for example, the Syria Trojan Women, when it was performed in Jordan, where many Syrian refugees were. And because of this, many of these refugees had lost their sense of self, their sense of identity and who they were, because they had lost their home, they had lost their heirlooms, they had lost basically everything that made them Syria except their families. And even then, they probably lost some of their family members. And so by watching a play that not only discusses the trauma that they've probably felt, but also ties back into their culture and revamps their culture, basically revamps their sense of self and who they are as a person and their identity nationally. Some believe it should be viewed more as political theater rather than therapeutic, because more often than not, the therapeutic theater plays involve political stuff, if that makes sense. It involves the trauma, but often the trauma was inflicted because of the government, inflicted because of a group or a people. And so because of this, it can be seen as political to that group that doesn't want this getting out there, that doesn't want people healing from these type of plays. And you're also putting basically your opinion out there, which can be seen as political. Therapeutic theater is different from traditional drama therapy, since drama therapy is traditionally a private affair. So for the therapeutic theater, it often involves speaking to a public and the audience and the actors themselves, who have also felt the trauma getting through it. But most of the time for drama therapy, it's a client or clients that have asked a playwright to create a play based off their trauma. to watch that play and help themselves get over their trauma. So it's more of a private affair rather than a public affair. Zither doesn't believe these plays will cause a huge revolutionary change, but that it does help in restoring hope. So what this basically means is he doesn't necessarily believe that these plays will cause a big change politically or revolutionary to the revolution that has been going on for years. But he does believe that it helps people heal and it helps them to restore hope that could eventually maybe help them fight again or continue to survive. And the private should become the public. Essentially, the private affairs of people, for example, the Syrian women who had to go through this traumatic event and their experiences being brought to the forefront for the public to see so that the public themselves can heal from this process. Now, onto the creator of the play, Omar Abu Saada. He was part of Syria's applied theater movement before the Syrian Uprising, so this was before 2011. It's just basically trying to bring more theater techniques to Syria. Omar Abu Saada studied under Nalia Abturash and Walid Al-Qawati. These people were pioneers in the Syrian Arab theater world. They helped bring therapeutic theater to a rise as well as political theater. And so him and his generation basically studied under these people. He would organize protests against government actions. So one example of this was when Assad, the leader, was not helping the Palestinians with their militia. And so in protest of this, Abu Saada created this group of 15 students to sit outside and protest against this with signs, of course. So it was a peaceful protest, but the Syrian government did not view it as peaceful. So they immediately tried to go to the head of the school, especially after the group started getting more students to participate with them. They went to the head of the school and was basically telling her, hey, we need you to stop this, but she was not agreeing with it. She told the students, hey, you can keep on protesting all you want. They stopped protesting once the families and people were getting threats, and the woman herself was actually fired from her position. For the public, it was seen as just, oh, her getting fired. There wasn't really a reason given. But of course, it was because she was purposely fired by the government. Founded the Studio Theater in 2004, and with this Studio Theater, he had many projects become unfunded and or denied permission to continue. So there's a couple of these that I can explain. One of them was when a group from the Studio Theater would go to basically the countrysides or the more rural areas and would talk with the people and would do theater games, but the theater games were more for like helping them get through their trauma and then also trying to learn their experiences, learn kind of how to help them. And this was funded at first, but then it got disfunded. The government was saying no more permissions for it. And then another example was when they were working with juvenile delinquents, but these juveniles had been tried as adults. So over there, from the age of 11 and up, you were tried as an adult compared to here, which is like 17 and 18, depending where you live. And so they tried to put on a play based around the boys' experiences with conjunction with another play. But after the first performance, it was denied permission to continue and underfunded. Now onto the Syria Trojan Women. It was performed in Amman, Jordan at the National Center for Cultural Arts, and they only had 7 weeks to put the play together and, get the actors ready. Now, these women had never acted before. They had never done anything like this. One of the women even talks about how she wanted to become an actor, but she could not because of her situation back at home. So, and if you've been involved in theater, you would understand that having 7 weeks to get people that have never done theater in their life, and the play itself wasn't even finished. They were using parts from the Trojan Women from the original play, but also using the women's own experiences in the play. So it wasn't even finished. So they had to basically make the play as they went along, as well as get these actors ready. It had a cast of 24 women that was originally 60, and the reason this went down was because of the women's fears for their families that were still back in Syria and them possibly getting hurt because their parts in the play. And then some of the women's husbands didn't want them doing it anymore. And of course, they had families they had to take care of, so not all of them could continue with the program. As previously mentioned, it connected the original script to the actors' own experiences with death and trauma and used the actors' own words in the play. So this ties back into the therapeutic theater aspect of this play, is that they were connecting the choral odes and the characters' monologues to the women's own experiences. And I will explain a bit more on the next page because I have pictures to help me explain those parts of the play. And in the play, they used both classical Arabic with rhythmic delivery and the Syrian dialect. So when they spoke the choral odes and the characters' monologues, they used the classic Arabic, and then which is basically used for more formal things in journals and newspapers. And they used the Syrian dialect when they spoke about their own experiences in their letters. And this is basically to give the parts with the Arabic more not humanity, but to give it less humanity, to give it more of like it's an outside presence, something that the audience can't necessarily connect to. While the Syrian dialect was from the women's own voices, the own way they spoke. So this gave their parts of the plays more humanity and could allow the audience to truly understand how they feel about their experiences. So as previously mentioned, here are some photos from the play. The bottom photo is a choral ode example where they would put their mouths over, or they put their hands over their mouths while they're reciting a choral ode. And this is, they did this throughout the play, not necessarily the hand part, but having the women stand like this as a chorus, just standing there speaking the same words, like almost a buzzing noise, it sounded like. Like it was there, but it didn't have any human presence. It didn't have anything to like, it was an outside experience compared to the inside experience of the trauma of the women. And then if you look at the top left photo, this is one of the examples of when the women would recite their experiences. And so this was done in two ways. It was either the, or technically three, but two ways. The women would have a letter on stage for one of them and a microphone in front of them, and they would read out the letter. And the letter was basically a hypothetical. If you could write a letter to something or someone back home, what would you say in it? Who would you write it to? So one woman, for example, used her home back in Syria, how she missed her home, how she missed feeling like the queen of the castle, how she missed her heirlooms and her jewelry and her money there. And then another woman for the other example is similar to the one in this picture where she would sit down in a chair with a microphone in front of her. And she talked about the Al Baida, what was mentioned earlier, the massacre, and how she had to leave her home and her family, some of her family stayed behind in the city. But of course the massacre occurred, and so her brother-in-law had to go back to the city and identify the bodies and bring them back so they could bury them. And then the last picture is an example of how they kind of also tied in the monologues of the original play with the actors themselves. So the woman facing forward would talk about her favorite character from the play and how that character kind of related to her, while the actor with her profile to the camera would actually recite a monologue from that character. So this is kind of trying to tie in the actors' preferences and how they're similar to the character with the original script. So the play itself originally was performed in Jordan and only had, it had two performances. One was in Jordan and another was in the UK for a conference. But it also had another lifespan. It was titled The Queens of Syria. It was the UK production and was performed in Oxford, Brighton, Liverpool, Leeds, and Durham, and at the New London Theatre in the UK. Now, this one was a bit different from the original one. It changed the outfits and staging of the original. It had only 13 members from the original cast because some of the women could not acquire visas, and again, their husbands didn't want them going over there. It raised 75 pounds sterling, which is about 103,000 in American US dollars for the production and its cast. And it was able to achieve this because it's believed by Zither it was able to achieve this because they changed some of the stuff of the play to a more Western version. Now, he also argues that this could have hypothetically derived the original intention from the original play, that by changing the colors, changing the aesthetics of the play, it could defeat the purpose of the original, defeat the healing purpose. But of course, this play was also performed to a different group of people. It's not being performed to refugees in Jordan that have had the same experiences as the women, but it's being performed to people that could possibly help Syria. It could people that could send aid to Syria by after watching this play and watching these women's experiences and seeing just how traumatic it has been over there, that they are more influenced to send help. And of course, they use media to promote the play and other projects to help spread their message. So what does this all technically kind of tie back into? So the virtual public sphere, what starts as therapeutic can become a call for action. And this is what happened to the Syria Trojan Women play, is that originally it started as a therapeutic play for the women and the people, the Syrian refugees in Jordan, to come to understand their trauma and come to a realization that they must move on while also remembering the past. But then, of course, when it was brought over to the UK for a different audience, it was more for a, hey, we need your help. This is what's happening to us. The spoken word starts it all, which is true for basically almost everything. Everything has started with a speech. Everything has started with a talk face to face, especially in little tiny circles. For example, one of the examples Zither gives in his article was by another person, Harbinus, who talks about the coffee shop, where journalists in a coffee shop, where these equals can come together and talk about what has been ailing them, their issues, what's been going on. And of course, over time, with the spread of the internet, it has come to allow people from different circles to interact with each other and talk to each other. Someone from a bit of a higher class can talk to someone that's a bit more of a lower class. And it can bring more awareness to the forefront of these issues that have been plaguing people. The virtual can become an extension of face-to-face interaction, which is basically what I previously mentioned, where originally, everything has been done face-to-face, but especially with the rise of COVID and stuff becoming more virtual, that type of interaction is not necessarily as benefic as it used to be. Now it's more, hey, we can talk online with multiple people from multiple backgrounds, multiple experiences, just to get a sense of what we need to do. And as Zither puts it, it's a revolutionary sphere that can allow for action and healing to take place through discussion, as well as allow the private concerns of individuals to become the concerns of the public. So, as previously mentioned with the play, it used the private concerns and the private affairs of the actors and brought them to the forefront so that it can become the concern of the public, so that they can act upon it and bring awareness to it. So the summary, basically, plays like the Syria Trojan Women demonstrate a rising form of therapeutic theater that has become prominent in recent times. By transferring private concerns into a public display through the use of therapeutic theater, it does not only help people to heal, but can send a political message as well. Though this has traditionally been a face-to-face affair, with the rise of the internet and other forms of media, it can be broadcasted globally. This allows for easier access to these plays and their message when before it could only be heard about from people within a certain group. Extras. So before I knew that Mr. Rabinowitz was gonna have y'all be able to watch the movie for free, I was gonna actually recommend the movie. I watched the documentary titled Queens of Syria, which is basically the first production of the play and the process that it took to get to the final product. It does not show the whole play, but it does show parts of the play, and the parts they show are very moving and very touching. So if you have not watched it yet, I highly recommend watching it. And if you're not able to watch it for free, it is $11, which is a bit pricey for a college budget, but it's still really good. And I did not watch the other one, which is The World to Hear, which is basically the UK tour, but I imagine it's similar to the Queens of Syria. And then, of course, my sources that I got for the Syrian Uprising. And then my discussion questions. Thank you.